Hi everybody, this is Mike and this is Module 7 in the Your Money, Your Goals Toolkit on understanding credit reports and scores. Now before I get into the tools in the toolkit, I just have my standard announcement. If you are a WISA certified through Cornell and you'd like continuing education credits for your participation in this webinar, those are available for you. Webinar will take about an hour. If you have any questions about how to log in your credits or access your portal, you can email Michelle Elvord at msa224@cornell.edu, and Michelle can log in those credits for you, or guide you through the process of logging in those anyway. So Module 7 is not going to be as applicable to the WISAs or the VR counselors on the line listening to this as a provider, because obviously you all know how to access and interpret your credit reports. However, a lot of your clients that you're working with may not. And these tools are geared towards helping a client know how to access their reports, how to read them, how to understand their score, and how to file any disputes if there are any incorrect information on there. If you are a WISA or a VR counselor and are listening to this, you're probably familiar with the financial health assessment that DARS recently developed as one of our newest WISA billable services. And last year when we first put this out, late last fall, we piloted the FHA to a small group at Wilson Workforce and Rehabilitation Center. And one of the questions on the FHA is whether or not clients know how to access and interpret their credit score, or whether they have requested a report in the last 12 months. There were a few people that indicated that they didn't believe that they had any credit because they didn't have a credit card. We all know that credit often goes way beyond credit cards, but clients don't always understand that. What I found interesting, though, is on one hand, the people said they didn't think they had any credit because they had no credit cards. But on the other question further down, it asks, have you ever been denied things like an apartment or an auto loan or a job because of negative or no credit? And the people answered yes. So they knew that they had issues with credit because they had been denied these certain items they were looking at based on negative or no credit, but they didn't fully understand what the credit meant. So these tools are just geared towards helping a client understand where they're at in terms of credit and why it's important. So the first part of the toolkit just starts off very basic, talking about the differences between debt and credit. And again, you guys as providers know this, but clients might not be as familiar or savvy with these concepts. So obviously credit is the ability to borrow money, and debt is what results from borrowing that money. Very simple. And on page 230, there's a hyperlink here. If you're looking at the Your Money, Your Goals toolkit in the electronic version, you can click on it and it'll give you a list of all the companies that either generate credit reports or may pull a credit report when a consumer asks for credit. So TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian will be on there, as well as some other companies that do look into people's credit history when they're looking for credits. So this next section talks a little bit about why credit reports and scores are important. Why do they matter? And clients don't always understand that credit is an asset. A lot of people, especially if they're on disability benefits, particularly SSI, they don't have a lot of money coming in to begin with. And so they're afraid to go out and get a credit card. They don't want to get in too much debt because they don't think they can pay it back. But yet, not having any credit at all might hurt them down the line when they're looking at getting things like trying to get a job, or trying to get an apartment, or getting a good insurance, or getting a lower payment on the cell phone plan, things that are dependent on your credit score. So, people are reluctant to get credit sometimes because they think credit is bad. It leads to debt that they can't afford to pay back, and they don't always realize that not having credit at all can also harm them more than it helps them. So, sometimes clients have trouble seeing the bigger picture where credit's concerned. It's not just something that you use to accumulate debt. It's something that can help you get things like lower interest on services in the future, and keep you from being rejected for housing and jobs and things like that are dependent on your credit score. Your Money Goals Toolkit recommends looking at the credit report at least once every 12 months. And there's a hyperlink here for annualcreditreport.com where a client can go on and request that their credit report gets sent to them electronically. And you see a lot of commercials and ads for all these credit reporting services. And as far as I'm aware, and I think the reason why it's in the Your Money, Your Goals Toolkit is I think annualcreditreport.com is the only service out there that is truly 100% free. Some of the other ones that you see advertised that people go for have hidden fees and charges associated with accessing a credit report, but a consumer can go to annualcreditreport.com if they have internet access and request a credit score and a report free of charge. Now, this recommends every 12 months. I personally check mine at least once a month because you never know when errors and things pop up that you might have to dispute. So once every 12 months is good practice for a client, but if they have the ability to do it sooner, there's services like Credit Karma that allow you to check TransUnion, and I think Equifax is the other one. That's a free service. Experian you do have to pay for, monitor monthly, but that is available too. And it's not a bad idea for clients to check more than just 12 months, or once every 12 months rather. So next section is basically on what's in a credit report. And again, you guys already know this stuff, but again, this is geared towards getting a client to understand who might not know. So credit report contains 5 sections, including the header and identifying information, the client's contact information, their name, their address, as well as other ways to distinguish their identities, such as social security number or date of birth, place of birth, other things that can identify them. And this is a credit report does not include some personal information as race or ethnicity. That's not relevant in terms of credit. Next section is public record information. So if a client has filed for bankruptcy, or if they have anything like a judgment against them, like if they have a past, credit card payment that went into default, judgments will be there on public records. And so that's something that an employer might look at, or a landlord might look at when somebody's looking to rent an apartment. They'll ask to pull that credit score. And if there's negative public records on there, it could hurt the client's ability to get these things. If there are default accounts and the accounts are with collections agency, the contact information for the collections agency that has the defaulted account may be on the report. Next section is credit account information in terms of what accounts a client currently has open, like the name of the company, the account number, when they opened it, when they might have last used the card, if it's a credit card, also things obviously like mortgage, auto loans, credit cards, student loans, those would all be on there. Whether or not the client has a co-signer, if the account has been closed, when was the date that was closed, what's the credit limit on the account, how much is owed on it, whether the client is current on the monthly payments for the account or whether it's past due 30, 60, or 90 days, whether the account was charged off, and the date the information was reported to the credit bureau. These are all things that would be under that section on accounts. Next thing is inquiries made on your account. This could be like if a client had applied for a credit card, the company that issues the card will go back and pull that credit report, and it'll show up on the credit report that ABC Bank made an inquiry on the account to check the client's credit worthiness. Next section talks about negative information, and negative information can really hurt on a credit report for the reasons that I previously mentioned. And I had a lot of clients, and I'm not saying this to judge, but people that were on maybe SSI or public assistance, and they would go out and take a credit card, and then they could pay it back, and they would have debt collectors coming after them all the time because they were opening up these cards even though they only had needs-based benefits, and then they couldn't pay them, and that really hurt them in terms of getting housing and other things they needed that was dependent on a credit score. So not everybody understands the concept of credit, and it's great to get a card and go out and charge it up, they think, but then they don't think long term or plan long term enough. It's like, what happens when the bill comes in and I got to start making these payments? So people can get themselves into trouble very quickly with credit card debt and other kinds of debt if they don't know how to manage their bills. And that's where I kind of hope that some of the other modules and some of the other tools that I've gone through previously on dealing with debt and debt collectors and on tracking income and bills would come in handy with your clients. If you have a client that's in a situation where they have went ahead and opened up credit cards and now they're having the trouble repaying them, I would hope that those tools would come in handy in those circumstances. But in terms of negative information in the toolkit, it just talks about how bankruptcies can stay on a person's credit report for 10 years, civil judgments, like if somebody was defaulted in maybe child support or a credit card and they were sued and taken to court for that, that could be on the report for about 7 years. People fail to realize, like, bankruptcy, it might seem like a quick solution to mounting debt, but it's not always the best solution because it can stay up on the report for 10 years and cause them problems down the line when they're trying to get their credit back into shape. Now I'm going to skip the next couple pages because this is just an example credit report, and we've all seen these. We all know what that looks like. Again, public records and collections would be listed there. Any accounts that they have and the balances, what they owe in any given month and what the monthly payment is, that would all be there. And then their payment history would also be part of it. Any inquiries that new companies might have made on their report. This is a helpful section on disputing errors on credit reports. I may have shared a story with you in one of my past webinars about a client that I had once who had an intellectual disability. She was pretty severely mentally retarded, and she was on public assistance while she was waiting on her SSI appeal to be decided. And a sister that she had took advantage of her and opened up some credit card accounts in the name of the sister that had the disability. So what she did was she had the sister that was mentally retarded open these accounts. Sister charged them up and then tried to stick her with the bills. And so she had uh, credit card companies coming after her. And eventually I took care of it. I just had to explain that she had a disability. I explained what happened, that she had a disability, that she was only on public assistance, and eventually it did get resolved. But it was a situation where she needed an advocate to step in and help her. So it's important for clients to know their rights in terms of disputing errors in situations like that where they might have been taken advantage of, or it might be a case of a stolen identity or a mistaken identity accounts being opened and reported on credit reports that the client didn't do. It's important for them to understand their rights. So what does a client do if there's a dispute on their credit report? They see like, hey, I didn't open this account, or I disagree with the amount of money that says that I owe. What do you do? So obviously the burden of proof is on the client to prove that the information on the credit report is wrong, right? So there's a couple different ways you can dispute information. One is to dispute it in writing by writing a letter to TransUnion, Equifax, or Experian, whichever one has the incorrect information on it. Or most of the time, a client can file disputes online these days. But if like for example, an example of an incorrect um, information on a credit report would be that a person still owes, I don't know, $500 on a credit card, but they have documentation that they paid it off. So it would be on the burden of the proof of the client to write a letter and include a copy of any receipts or anything else that they showed a zero balance on that card for the credit card company and the credit reporting bureau to correct it. Now, your Money Your Goals um, toolkit recommends that if there is a dispute with both the credit bureau and the company issuing the card, let's say ABC Bank has on an Experian report that a client owes maybe $500 more than they do, and the report is not being updated. It recommends both writing a letter to ABC Bank and to Experian asking them to resolve that issue with a copy of any receipts. And it says that if a client is filing a dispute by mail, they should never send any originals or any original receipts or any original documentation they have to prove a dispute. They should just submit copies. And in a couple minutes, when I go through some of the tools on this module, there's tool 2 of a checklist where a client can go through some of the different things they have to do to dispute a transaction and make sure that they cover all the bases. So I'll just cover that in a minute. And this is whether you file your dispute directly with the creditor or the credit card or the credit reporting company. So the creditor is the lender. The credit reporting company might be Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. They generally have 30 days from the time that a client files a dispute to investigate. And then they get another 15 days if a consumer submits additional documentation to support their dispute once they file that initial claim. And then within 5 days of that, then the credit reporting bureau and the lender is required to send the client a letter detailing their findings on the dispute. And this is either way: if the dispute results in the business changing the information furnished about you, the business must notify the various credit reporting companies it shared the information with. So let's say ABC Bank finds out that, hey, that $500 credit card bill that we said that you owed BC, that was our error. You did pay it on time. You weren't late or whatever. Then they would be in charge of notifying the credit bureaus too, so that they can fix the error. Next section just talks about credit scores and why credit scores are a difference between the credit report bureaus, how credit scores are calculated. Not going to go through a whole lot of information on that because we're all familiar with it, but lowest is generally 300, highest is 850. Anything usually above 700 is considered good, and 750 or higher is considered excellent credit. But it gives you a little chart here about how the different companies calculate a credit score. And I kind of found this interesting because you would think that length of credit history would be very important, or the types of credit used would be important, but really that's only 15% and 10% respectively. Mostly, according to this, what lenders are looking at when a client applies for new credit is payment history on previous accounts, which is obviously very important, and how much money that a client currently owes in relation to their income. So obviously they're a high risk if they have $20,000 in debt and they only make $25,000 a year. That's really not an example of a great credit risk. So amounts owed in current accounts and payment history are two of the biggest pieces that lenders are going to look at when determining a client's credit worthiness for a new account. So payment history tracks whether you're paying your bills on time as agreed. If it's a credit card or a mortgage or an auto loan, whatever it is the client making the payments on time as agreed, on time and in the right amounts. It'll track if the bills are being paid late or not at all. It obviously includes the amount owed, so the total amount owed on every account. The length of the credit history is self-explanatory. And the new credit is tracked by measuring inquiries about you for credit. If there are too many inquiries, then that could be negative too, because it looks like you're demanding too much in credit, and it might be an indicator that if a client tries to apply for too many cards at once, that they're planning on spending more money in credit than they have coming in. If it looks like they need the credit, it could be an example of a high risk. And then types of credit used are considered in the FICO scores. And scores usually increase if you have both credit cards, which is considered revolving debt, and loans, like a student loan or a mortgage or car loan, in good standing. So it helps to have different types of accounts in good standing, not just a credit card or not just the auto loan, but to have different types of accounts and have them all in good standing. So obviously that's going to help that credit score go up. And this is just a bar graph of the above pie graph that talks about which factors help in a client in determining their credit score. As you can see, the most important thing obviously is payment history. Somebody has a good payment history, it's a good indicator that the lender will get their money back. Type of credit and how long the accounts have been open, the percentage of the credit limit used. If a client has a $5,000 limit on a card, they don't want to charge it up to $499.99. That's not a good indicator of a good way to use credit. But if they have a $5,000 credit limit and they've only used $500, then that's a better indicator that they're good stewards of that credit use. Next section talks about credit utilization rate, and it is basically calculated by the amount of credit that a person has available to them versus how much of that credit they've used. And it gives you an example of how to understand credit utilization. This is good for a client that might need help in understanding how to calculate this. So somebody has a credit card with $5,000 limit and she has charged $3,500 on the card. Her credit utilization rate is calculated as follows. So it's $3,500, the amount charged on the card, divided by 5,000, which is the credit limit, equals 0.7 or 70%. So in this case, a client is using 70% of her available credit. That's kind of a high number, but it gives you an example of how to make it so that the credit utilization is less. If she sets a goal of lowering her revolving utilization of this card to 25% or less, her revolving balance should be no more than. So it's, again, the credit limit 5,000 multiplied by 25%, or so $1,250. So in order for her to utilize less than 25% of the card, she's got to keep her balance down below $1,250 at all times. So 25% utilization looks a lot better than 70%. So that's kind of an easy, straightforward way for a client to calculate how much of the card they're using percentage-wise, and help them in determining to set a more reasonable goal to lower that usage. This is next section that I found really interesting when I first read this. It talks about, are you credit invisible? And basically it just means people that have little to no credit. They might not have a credit history as reported by the credit bureaus, or a very substantial one, because they just don't use credit. The numbers were a little bit higher than I expected. These days we're kind of a cashless society. A lot of people use credit cards, and a lot of people pay on payment plans and things like that. But there are people out there that are referred to as maybe credit invisible. So it says a limited credit history can create barriers if you're looking to access credit. I mean, that's a given. That's pretty self-explanatory. If you want to start a business or buy a house or car, you might just want credit that comes with better terms and lower interest rates, right? So like I was saying before, a lot of clients don't understand that credit is really an asset. It's not just a debt builder that gets people in trouble. It can be an asset when it comes to getting lower terms, lower interest rates, and lower payments for certain things. But it says that the CFPB reported in 2015 on the number of consumers who have little or no credit nationwide. It highlighted two groups of people. The first group is consumers without a credit history, which they referred to as credit invisible. And the second is unscorable, which means they have a very thin file and an insufficient credit history. Maybe they have one credit card, and that's it. So 9.9 million people have an insufficient or no credit history. That's pretty substantial for me, I thought. Oops. Let me get back to where I was. And so the report also found further that one in 10 customers, or 26 million people, can be considered credit invisible, and 19 million consumers have unscorable credit records. That's about 8% of the population. And they found that consumers that were African American or Hispanic were more likely to not have a trackable credit history in terms of credit usage as opposed to different populations. That's kind of a lot of people out there that don't have a credit history or a substantial one, and that can kind of hurt them in terms of accessing services and getting work. So first tool that I want to go over is getting your credit reports and scores, and it just kind of goes through how to help a client do that, or helping them, pointing them to the right resources that would allow them to access those reports. Excuse me for just a second, I need a drink. I need to keep water handy when I speak. So this talks about what I was going through earlier on accessing your free annual report, and through this client can access their credit report once every 12 months. And again, if they have things like Credit Karma, or if they pay for the Experience service, they can check it more than that, but they can get one free report a year. And it says some states and territories allow for additional free reports, and Virginia is not on that list. So a client here would be limited to one per year, unless they meet some of the following. So it says even if a client has gotten their free credit report in the past 12 months, they can still get one if they are unemployed and look for employment within the next 60 days. The employer may need a copy of that credit report, and so a client can access it that way. If they're getting public assistance, if they think that there is fraud committed, or if there's a dispute on the credit report that they want to make sure has been resolved, they can get a credit report that way. If a credit report has been flagged by one of the credit bureaus or a creditor as having suspicious activity on it, then a client can get another copy of the credit report. Or if they've had an adverse action taken on them within the past 12 months, like they've been denied a credit card or an employment or insurance because of credit. In this case, if a client, let's say, has been denied a job, if the employer says, well, we'd like to hire you, but your credit score is not within, our qualifications, then the client has 60 days to request a credit report and review it based on the denial of that employment. Next section talks about how to order the credit report. Again, annualcreditreport.com is a free one they can check every 12 months. And if you click on this hyperlink, it'll ask the client to complete basic information like name, social security number, address, all their identifying information, and from which bureaus they want: Equifax, TransUnion, or Experian. And then, of course, they will be asked to answer some identifying questions as a way for the credit bureaus to verify their identity, like maybe mother's maiden name, or a previous address of a place that they may have lived, or tell us the name of one of your accounts, that sort of stuff. And they'll give you a PDF to print out, and it just says, as an FYI, and this should be pretty self-explanatory, but if a client does access this information They should do it at home if at all possible, and avoid doing it in a public place like a library. Um, if it's done in public, that's considered a high risk of maybe somebody else inadvertently receiving that information or seeing it. Talks about alternative methods. If they don't have a computer, maybe they can mail their request in for their credit reports or call. And then it talks about getting credit scores, and the credit score is just obviously the number based on the credit worthiness between 300 and 850, and just not the full report with all the accounts listed. And again, it uses the example of like a client can get their credit score for free if they've been denied an apartment or a job or something like that, or if they've been denied a credit loan or a car loan or something like that, then they can also get a free credit score. And this tool is a way for clients to track their score and the dates that they requested the reports. So you just see Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. They can record what the score was and the date that they requested the reports. And it talks about, again, the situations where a client has the right to request a credit report and score for free. Applying for a mortgage, application for credit is turned down. You get less favorable terms from a lender than the terms available to people who get credit from that lender. So if a client is being asked to pay a higher interest rate on something than somebody else for the same service, a client can go back to the credit credit bureau and request that. So excuse me, tool one is just a way to keep track of which credit bureaus that the client has reported to and received back information from. Tool two is the credit report review checklist, and this is once a client receives their credit report, they want to go through it, obviously, to make sure that everything is accurate. And this ordering, it is not enough. You have to read it and understand it to identify if there are mistakes or any errors that need to be disputed in it. And it says, use the following worksheet to review each section of the report. Be sure to keep copies of your reports in a safe place. And it just gives you, or the client rather that would be using it, it gives them some tips on what to look for that might be wrong. So obviously, is the name correct? Is it spelled correctly? If the social security number is on it, is that correct? Is address correct? Marital status listed correctly? Maybe if somebody was married once and got divorced, they want to make sure that the credit report reflects that appropriately. Employment history, is that accurate? Is there anything listed in the public record information section? Is it correct? And if not, what's wrong? Look at all your accounts. If a closed account if an account has been closed, is it listed closed on the report? Is that reported correctly with a zero balance in a closed account? Or is it listed as still open? Are the balances right? Is what's reflected on the credit report as being said what the client owes the correct amount, or are they making payments that aren't reflected on the credit report? If a client has filed for bankruptcy, is that listed on there as a discharged account, or is it still showing up that they owe that account? If somebody has co-signed a loan for somebody else, is that listed on the credit report correctly? Every account that's on there should only be on there once. If it's on there more than once, it's most likely an error that a client would have to dispute. Look at payment history. Is there negative information on the report that could be harmful to the client? So, for example, if they paid a credit card bill on time, but for some reason the credit bureau gets it late and says that they're 30 days late, that should be something that a client could be able to dispute, because they can prove that they paid the bill on time and that the fact that it's 30 days late on the credit report is incorrect. So there are things here to recommend that a client review carefully when looking over their credit report, and highlight any inaccuracies or any mistakes that might need to be corrected. Next section talks a little bit about what a person should do if they find a dispute in their credit report, and what steps to take in order to get it resolved. So it says to correct mistakes, it can help to contact both the credit reporting company and the source of the mistakes. So again, if ABC Bank, the client's creditors makes a mistake and it's been reported to Experian, the client should go back to both ABC Bank and Experian and say, hey, we have a problem here. There's an error that I think you need to fix. They need to explain why they think it's wrong, and including any supporting documents to support their case as to why they think it's wrong. And usually the way to dispute information on a credit report item is usually in writing, either online or just a hard copy. And it talks about in the client's letter, they should clearly identify each mistake separately, state the facts, why they disagree with the decision, explain why they are disputing the information in the report, and request whether it should be removed or corrected. It says you may want to enclose a copy of the portion of the report that contains the disputed items, circle or highlight the disputed items, and include copies of any documents that you have to support your position. It says you may choose to send your letter of dispute to the credit report companies by certified mail. That's always a good way to do it. I always tell people that are on Social Security, if they're reporting wages by mail, they should do it certified, because that way Social Security's got to sign that they received it, and then they have proof that they reported their wages later if it's ever in question. Same thing here with the credit card companies. It's always the idea, if they're sending anything through the mail, to send it certified, just so that they have a return receipt that the credit bureau did, or the creditor, whichever one they're disputing with, did receive the information. And this chart just has all the contact information for the 3 credit bureaus, both online, mail, and phone number. And obviously keep copies of everything that you send in. Don't send in any original supporting documentation. Make copies, but also make copies of any dispute letters that the client sends in, and also any response from the creditor or the credit bureau. Those things should all be kept together. And then it says if a client suspects that the error on the report is the result of identity theft, It gives a hyperlink for identitytheft.gov for information about identity theft and steps to take if you have been victimized. And this will include filing a fraud alert or security freeze. Basically, what a security freeze is saying, hey, I think I'm the victim of identity fraud and I need a freeze put on my report, and that should prevent the person that has taken advantage of that client from being able to access their credit to open up any new accounts or anything like that. If they try to open up a new account, that should flag it as a report that has been filed as a potential fraud. So if a person who has committed identity theft attempts to open up an account in somebody else's name, they could be caught because that account has previously been identified as fraud. So this is whether a client has chosen to directly dispute with the creditor, which is like ABC Bank or whatever the lender is, or the credit reporting company. Each generally has 30 days to investigate the claim. Again, that was repeated from up above. And it says that they can also submit a complaint to the Consumer Protection Bureau. And there's the contact information for the website and for the CFPB. So if there's a potential for fraud there, if a person thinks they have been victimized, they can go to the CFPB and request help in the form of an advocate to help them get it straightened out. But if they are going to file a dispute, there's some handy tips in this tool about what things they should include. So again, these are the steps. So write a letter to the credit company that sent you the report with the wrong information on it. You can find a guide to writing a letter along with the template at consumerfinance.gov. And I believe there's a template in the Your Money Grows Toolkit as well. I'll go through that in just a minute. Provide the account number for the account that's wrong. For each item, can explain why they disagree. And it says if you have it, include copies of bills or any cleared checks to show that the client has been paying the account as agreed and show that they have paid them on time. Provide the address and telephone number at the end of the letter so they can contact you if they have any questions. Copy the letter before sending it off and send the letter return receipt. Pretty straightforward. Tool 3 is information on how to improve your credit report and score. And excuse me again, I need to take another drink. And these are just pretty straightforward tips on how to improve a negative credit score. So obviously, paying all your accounts on time as agreed is a big help. Make sure the information in the report is correct. If it's not correct, file a dispute as I talked about above. And it says if you have access to credit, don't use too much of it. Like I said before, if a client has a $5,000 limit on a credit card and they charge up $499.99, that's a higher risk than somebody that has a much lower credit utilization rate. So, be on time with the bills, be consistent with paying every account on time, keep your credit utilization low. Obviously, a client wants to use credit from time to time. They have a credit card sitting in their wallet for 3 years they don't touch, that account might be closed on them because they're not using it. So they want to periodically use their revolving credit to keep those accounts open, but also keep the balances low enough where it doesn't negatively impact their score. And that's a balancing act. but eventually, clients do get the hang of using credit appropriately if they do it long enough. So it talks a little bit about, strategies and steps a client can take to improve their credit report and their score. So obviously one is make sure that they check their credit reports annually, review them for accuracy. If there are errors, dispute them with the the issuer of the account, or B, with the credit reporting bureau. Best practices to dispute with both. Make sure you understand what your credit score means, and again, pay bills on time and keep the credit utilization low. Here's an interesting strategy on reports and scores. Keep unused credit cards open. This brings down your overall credit utilization rate. Your goal is to keep paying down debt, and you may be tempted to use the card, but keeping the account open might not help you reach the goal. So, it makes sense that it would look better if a client had a card that was paid as agreed and they closed it. You know, they would think maybe it looks better that they don't have so many open accounts, but it does look better to have a account on a credit report that they're not using but is open, because they've got more available credit then. If an account is closed, it's not counted in terms of their available credit that they're not using. So it actually might hurt the client's score to have closed accounts. One of the tips from the CFPB is to leave credit accounts open even if they're paid off, to show that they have more in credit than they're using. That could be helpful or hurtful to the client. It could cause more temptation to create more debt. If they have a card that they paid down but it's open that they can use, they might be tempted to go spend that money. Hopefully not, but it's a risk they take by keeping that account open, and they just got to be prudent in how they manage that credit that they got available. Next step is to develop a plan to take care of outstanding judgments or liens. You may be able to negotiate with a creditor or collector. So if there are accounts on a credit report that maybe have gone to collections, one of the ways to improve your score, or for a client to improve their score, is obviously making contact with the collections agency and working out a suitable payment arrangement, because that way, even though there's a collection on the report that could hurt their score, it also helps if the collection company can show that the client is paying as agreed to whatever payment plan they've agreed to. Get on a payment plan for medical debt and make sure your healthcare provider is not reporting the balance as outstanding. Most of the time, if it's a medical bill, a lot of the hospitals and doctor's offices will be good about working with people on suitable payment arrangements. Some of the hospitals have charity care programs where they can disregard the balance owed if somebody has really low income. But as with creditors that have judgments against you, collections agencies, clients can work out payment arrangements with them, and they can also work out payment arrangements with a medical provider. And then pay down old debt in debt collections, even if it was a debt from a year ago, 2 years ago. If it's gone to collections and a client can afford to pay it, they should, because it shows that they did pay it, and they can get those old judgments off a credit card. Another strategy to build a credit report and score is to use secured cards. This can be a way to build a positive credit history because the credit limits tend to be low with these cards. Be sure to watch your credit utilization rate, not getting too close to the limit. Again, that's the balancing act between how much credit is available and how much is owed. Credit utilization probably over 25% is looked at as a higher risk than people that use less than that. Credit builder loans. This is visit a bank or credit union to find out about these products. With some credit builder loans, you make monthly payments first and then receive the loan amount when it is paid off. This helps you avoid taking on debt when you build a positive payment record. And then some nonprofit organizations provide access to secured cards or credit builder loans. Be sure to ask about the terms just as you would at a bank or credit union. So taking out a loan, taking out a credit card is not necessarily a bad thing. It can help a client build up positive credit history if they know how to manage their credit appropriately, or if they learn to. Tool 4 is keeping records to show that you've paid your bills. If there is a time where there's an error on a report and a client has to dispute that they have paid a bill, there's got to be a paper trail, right? So it is important to create a paper trail. It means that you have to keep records. So you can prove things like that you paid a bill on time that a creditor has reported as late, paid a debt that the creditor has reported that was unpaid, send a letter to a debt collector who has not received it, and paid your rent in cash. You want to get a receipt. So, the importance of a paper trail could, be the difference between whether or not a dispute gets taken off a report or not. So it's important for clients to be able to prove their claims that they want to dispute a charge if they need to. This is record keeping can be difficult. Here are a few steps of keeping your records up to date. To get a calendar, or use tool 2, the bill calendar in module 4. If you listen to the module 4 webinar, we talked a little bit about how that was a calendar where a person could list all their bills, the amount due, the due dates. That kind of helps a client stay on track in terms of when things are due and in what amounts. Hang this calendar in a place that you could see it daily or in your money management spot. I recommended, I think, at the time that I did that webinar, that maybe somebody keep it just on the refrigerator. I mean, that's some place that they're going to see every day, and it's a reminder of when a certain bill is due. I mean, it's not something they forget about. If they've got it on that calendar, it's right on the refrigerator. They'll see it several times a day, and it'll prevent them from, maybe forgetting to make a payment or something. It talks about the importance of organizing all your bills and your receipts in folders or envelopes. And it gives a client an example how to do it. You can even use large envelopes you receive in the mail. Give each category a color. For example, you could do it like this. Anything that pertains to income, like Social Security statements or anything like that, pay stubs, would go in a green folder, saving and investments in yellow, expenses in blue, debt in purple, credit reports in beige. So, client can do whatever they want with that, but it's just an example of ways to keep them organized. Other important papers like insurance policies, deeds to home, car titles, birth certificates, warranties, make sure that the client puts it in a place that those things are easily accessible. When they're looking at organizing their paperwork for the month, make sure they put the receipts in the right place, or if they have a deposit slip in the bank, make sure that goes in their income folder. Checking account statements goes in their income folder. Paycheck stubs, it could go into their green folder that they're using to track their income. Credit card bills would go in their purple folder because that's a debt. These are examples of ways to keep track of the paperwork that a client has coming in. And then it says once a week, sit down to pay the bills that are due that week. It might be overwhelming for a client to do bills or balance their checkbook only once a month, but maybe if they take it in little steps, sit down once a week with all their bills and just work on the ones that are due at that point, might be a little bit easier for them to manage and handle. And then take all the records for the month and store them together. So keep all your folders together with a rubber band. And then finally, there's a keeping records checklist. So these are things that could potentially be important paperwork for the month that it's come in. And then a client can check as to whether or not they've kept any of these things like tax returns, paycheck stubs, bank records, so on and so forth. Okay, and that's the module on credit reports and scores. Module 8 on money services, cards, accounts, and loans. Finding what works for you, that will be the next webinar. We've only got 2 modules left. There are 9 modules altogether. Gone through the first 7. Have 2 more to do. I anticipate having the last 2 webinars done by late August. Assuming that I can keep to that schedule, I will have all 9 modules recorded and archived by the end of the summer. And always, if you have any questions on any of the tools in Module 7 or any of the modules, if you have any questions on how to access the Your Money, Your Goals toolkit or use any of the tools with your clients, or if you have any questions on how to order hard copies, don't hesitate to reach out. Michael, Michael.Klinger, Klinger @dars.virginia.gov, or I've got a new phone number. New phone number is 804-245-5593. I would be glad to answer any questions you have about any of the tools or how you might be able to use it in your work. Thank you all. Bye-bye.